Hi, everybody, and welcome to another installment, Season 5 of the AO-GP.org Outside of the Church podcast. I am your co-host, Jonathan Burke, here with Jason Roba. Today's podcast we have titled, interestingly enough, Your Body and You. Now, why would we title a podcast, Your Body and You? Now, for our new listeners, we should probably start off with that. Jason, you wanna take that preamble there?
Yeah. So I thought this would be nice, a nice caveat of yesterday's podcast where we were talking about the state of OT, the state of being an operating thetan and being at cause over the body. And as I was mentioning to you before we started recording here, I thought it'd be a cool idea, an interesting idea, and have some valuable information for folks to, we could talk about, how to be more at cause over the body. Because while we have one, it's still there. We still have considerations about it, despite what anybody will tell us. We're always, for the most part, going to have one to take care of here. So this again, it also is a nice caveat off of the dopamine podcast and everything we did. So this would be a good one. Sure, it's something we all have a lot of attention on our bodies. I know I certainly do sometimes. And this is something we can all relate to, even our friends listening to us from within OSA.
That is the Office of Special Affairs inside the church. So
very special affairs.
Very special affairs. So here you go. You are a being who controls. You can be in the body if you want to, per LRH. But it's very uncomfortable. It's more like the body is a sliver in your thumb, not the other way around.
Right.
And this is very important for people to understand. And when we did the How to Introduce Scientology to Your Friends in New Ways podcast, we were talking about how you can do the little drill with people to show them that they are outside of their body. Well, okay, so they're outside of their body. They are themselves. They are not out of valence. Otherwise, they see through the body's eyes. And this is how this whole thing works. You're 3 feet in back of your head per Hubbard, or off to the right or to the left. Doesn't really matter. But you're dealing with, and this is the crux of the matter is you're dealing with a composite being. So if you imagine a bus going down the road, and you have a bus driver, and you're the bus driver, and the bus is your body. You have certain constituents in that body, of which there are a few different types. One of them is mentioned, without going any kind of confidential, is mentioned on the Milestone 1 lectures that you can find on our SoundCloud account and listen to those. We'll get into that here in a bit. We're going to approach it from that perspective, not from a confidential perspective. And then the other is genetic entities. So where do we go from here, Jason?
Well, I'll just say before we get into Milestone 1 stuff, which I'll just tell everybody, that's so far my favorite lecture series of Ron's. I just really thoroughly enjoy those, and I want to go back and listen to them probably a third time now. But I would like to go with this one as the fact that something I've observed myself is that the body's always going to bull-bait you. It's always going to want to pull attention in so that it's the center of attention, as far as what I've observed. No matter what gender, no matter what age, no matter what anything, it's going to do what it can to get your attention, to make things, to make your attention fixated on it. And there are various ways to combat that, to have good control, to have good discipline, so that the body's not always such a bull baiter like that. But it's just something that I've observed. And I'm not sure how much of that we want to get into with the Milestone 1 stuff there, with talking about some of those things. But as far as case stuff goes, getting certain things out of the way, doing either Dianetics or doing the grades can really help clear some of those issues up, so that there's not as much attention on that part of the composite case.
Right, and that's another aspect of it is you've got the below clear, you've got the Dianetic case, and this is an important factor to bring up. Probably in order of operations, that would probably be the best part of the composite case to address first, which is the Dianetic aspects of it, where you have different psychosomatic illnesses that are impacted upon the body. It could be a broken leg, it could be an operation, it could be any number of things that affect the body, and that is part of the case there, where you have an engram in that particular area, and it'll show up on the meter. We have a form that we use, a pre-assessment form, that we assess on the meter to find out what kind of engram it is, how it shows up, whether it's, from heat or from a break or from any number of things. And that's how you approach the case in Dianetics. So these ridges occur on the body. So you could have, let's say you punched your fist through a wall out of anger at some point and your knuckles constantly hurt. Well, when you do that sort of a thing, and it's an engram, you develop ridges. And ridges are basically where you have one force going one way and one force coming from another, and they meet and they create a standing wave in the middle. And these ridges affect the body in a myriad number of ways. Joints in particular tend to develop arthritis when ridges are present. This is a very interesting aspect of Dianetics is, how do all of these different body problems occur? So with a composite case, and looking at it from the Dianetics vector or angle, you're looking at a lot of ridges that have occurred because of a force inward. Force is what causes these engrams, because the body is very sensitive. It's very touchy. You're dealing with a body that, from what Hubbard says, and I mean, it's just factual. You're dealing with it's very particular. It has to have a set temperature. It has to have a set air pressure. It can only operate at a certain blood pressure rate within a fine band. So it's a very touchy thing in that this body has, and I don't know how many of our listeners know about this, and it might be fun to list these off as well, did you know that you have in the body 50 some odd perceptions?
Yeah.
Because your body is basically a sensor array.
Mm-hmm.
And that sensor array is, it's like walking around, like your smartphone has a bunch of sensors in it. It's got the near field sensor, and it's got, all smartphones have an FM AM radio in them.
Mm-hmm.
All smartphones have Bluetooth, and it senses via radio waves in the Bluetooth part of the spectrum. And they all have barometers in them too. I don't know if people knew that, but your cell phone has a barometer in it. So the body is not so dissimilar, but it's got 52 sensors.
Mm-hmm.
We could delineate those, but it's a long list. And all of these sensors, do you want to go over that?
Sure. Yeah. I think people would find that fascinating.
So give us the list of perceptions.
All right. So
that we have.
Yeah. So this is from CS Series 101, list of perceptics. This is HCO Bulletin 23 July 1978 for anybody wanting to look it up. So there are 57 of them. Time, sight, taste, color, depth, solidity, that's barriers, relative sizes, external, sound, pitch, tone, volume, rhythm, smell, and that's the sense of smell has 4 subdivisions, which are categories of the type of odor. Touch, and those are divided into pressure, friction, heat or cold, oiliness, personal emotion, endocrine states, awareness of awareness, personal size, organic sensation, including hunger, heartbeat, blood circulation, cellular and bacterial position, gravitic, self and other weights, motion of self, motion exterior, body position, joint position, internal temperature, external temperature, balance, muscular tension, saline content of self, body, fields, magnetic, time track motion, physical energy, personal wariness, etc., self-determinism, relative on each dynamic, moisture, self, sound direction, emotional state of other organs, personal position on the tone scale, affinity, self and others, communication, self and others, reality, self and others, emotional state of groups, compass direction, level of consciousness, pain, perception of conclusions, past and present, perception of computation, past and present, perception of imagination, past and present, perception of having perceived, past and present, awareness of not knowing, awareness of importance, unimportance, awareness of others, awareness of location and placement, and that's divided into masses, spaces, and location itself, perception of appetite, and number 57 is kinesthesia.
57 of them.
Yeah.
So these are all of the perceptions that a being has with a body. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you're saying how the smartphone has its, I forgot what they call them, but it's also they've got those sensors that determine which way the phone is facing if you've got it held upright or in landscape mode.
With a gyroscope.
Yeah. And then it can, it's got a number of sensors in there. And it's just, as I think here's one of you mentioned to me several months ago, it was in one of the I think it was a 1963 lecture from the St. Hill Special Briefing course where he talks about the different types of bodies out there.
Yeah.
And, we've got these meat bodies that we're in, but there's been the doll bodies, there's been hybrid machine and meat bodies, and there's just machine bodies. You talked about one of those on a recent podcast, and it seems like we're coming, not to go off on too far of a tangent again, but it seems like we're coming close again to the ability
transhumanism, as they've been calling it lately.
Right. The combination of the meat body with electronics, and this has happened on the time track many a time, and it seems like we're getting close to that again, as there are machines that are complex enough for awareness to go into. Like if somebody can project their awareness into a doll, somebody can project their awareness into a machine or into a smartphone.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, they're with this whole AI thing that they've been doing with the MRI machines and everything like that, where they're mapping out the brain, and the AI is at a point where it's sort of like where Mid-Journey was, or maybe a little earlier, where if a person thinks of a certain thing, they can render what it is the person is thinking of to a certain degree based off of what they're looking at in the brain scan in the body.
Yeah.
So, and that's the technology that they're making aware to the public. So advance that by 75 years is usually the rule of thumb, and that's what they really have.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a brave new world, everybody.
Right.
So, as far as a body goes, it is, Hubbard says, the definition of a silly optimist is a person who thinks that you're going to feel good in a meat body every day.
Yeah, not going to happen.
Yeah, because there's, it's humidity, there's temperature, there's air pressure. These people say, oh, my joints are aching, must be a storm coming in, type of a thing. Well, that's barometric pressure affecting the body.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that this leads to is that you can get on a meter as a solo auditor, and the body can have a thought. The genetic entities in the body can have a thought. You've probably seen them.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and you're like, what's that? That wasn't me. and it wasn't what you were auditing, it was the body, and the body's like, hungry.
Yeah.
You know?
Noticed that when I was doing OT too, there's these reads. I know the speed and needle motion, needle characteristic of my reads, and I'd see these real sluggish, like reads. So
It's like the caveman, you know, responding to whatever its desire or need is that you can tell on a meter that well, you describe it. What's the difference between your reads and the body's reads?
Yeah, like the one I was just describing there of like my instant read, I see the needle dart to the right really quickly, and there's a certain speed that my reads look like, and then I've noticed there's like a slower, not so instant read that's kind of sticky and gooey, like the needle's having to move through molasses to get the read off of it. And you know, I've had some at first they were just like these kind of maybe a tick or a small fall, and then I had these really long falls that were gooey looking. They're just the needle would just have this really like slowed down,
molassesy kind of read.
Yeah, and it's usually a little bit latent. It's like I can tell it's not what we're defined as an instant read, but it shows
right.
up.
Yeah, and you know they're sort of errant reads.
Yeah,
it's just sort of like if there was another person in the room, they interjected something into the conversation on the needle on the dial.
Yeah,
and you know it has, depending on what it is that you're auditing, the needle state, as we will call it, is different, and you can kind of see, oh, that's participant A, and oh, this is participant B, and this is me.
Yep.
So this is where, and this is how Hubbard came up with the understanding of these different things back in 1952 with the old Matheson meter, tube meter the size of a bread box, and delineated this stuff out in the Milestone 1 lectures that we were talking about a while ago, and then also history of mailing.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Yeah. First
so
time
with
go ahead. Time you could pick these up, you know, everybody, you know, a smattering of people getting on the cans, having the same incidents on their track without being prompted to look for them, you know. So I think it's so cool the way he was able to scout these things out. And you know, he talks about heavy facsimile 1 there in the Milestone 1 lectures, as well as in the History of Man. And I know for me, that one, you know, the body gets that one keyed in. I think for me, it's this, I've got this microphone with a pop filter in front of my face. And I think that's actually what re-stimulates in my facsimile for me when I do these podcasts. After we end up doing these for about 20 minutes, I start getting the pressure on my face. And I think it's actually this pop filter right in front of me.
Hubbard says here in the History of Man, the genetic entity, or the GE as we call it, is the second area of address. This is the entity which carries forward from the earliest formation of the physical meat, matter, energy, space, and time body. It is this entity which has the genetic line engrams. It's located more or less in the center of the body, the stomach, but it is actually a composite of all the cellular experience on the line, or the time track line. It has the manifestation of a single identity. Out of all the past experiences with the MEST, again, matter, energy, space, and time, we Scientologists love our acronyms, body, it makes up a working carbon oxygen engine. It has no real personality, is not the I of the body. It has a record in many cases of the entire experiences forward until the last life. The genetic entity has a record of past deaths. Auditing it alters physical structure, eradicates physical malformations. And this is where the distinction needs to be made, that when you're auditing in a regular Scientology auditing session at the under clear, you're auditing the composite being, which is you and all the clowns in the bus. I like to make the analogy of, you have a bag of marbles. Some of them are cat's eyes. Some of them are you know, different colors, and some are a little bit bigger than others. You take that bag of marbles and you drop it out on the floor. And so that's the composite case. That's the genetic entity. That's you. That's the milestone one stuff. All there. And what you're doing with auditing is you're taking that big mess of marbles on the floor, and you're taking a marble and you're putting it, starting a line. You grab one marble, grab another marble, and space it between the next one by about a half an inch, an inch. And what you're doing with auditing is you're taking these marbles and you're putting order into disorder generally, which will affect the genetic entity, like he says here. Auditing it alters physical structure, eradicates physical malformations. And this is where Dianetics comes in, because in Dianetics, New Era Dianetics, and original Dianetics from 1950, standard Dianetics being New Era Dianetics, modern Dianetics, what you're doing is you're auditing the composite being. So it's like, okay, everybody in the room, listen up. We're going to run an engram, right? Hey, everybody in the room, listen up. We're going to run some recall processes using ARC straightwire. Recall the time you saw a wildflower. What was the smell? And so everybody in the room says collectively, whatever the answer is, it was a fragranty, flowery smell. Okay, good. Or you're running an engram. What you're doing is you're running it as a general thing. And that's what happens is you're either auditing all, some, or one particular part of the composite case. So in this case here, if it's genetic entity, it's going to eradicate physical malformations, alter physical structure. And the thing with auditing is that back in the 70s, for example, I've never seen this in a folder except one time, and it was an old folder at Kansas City Org back in 1989, and it was from the early 70s. And this is back, I'm sure some people are familiar with Polaroid cameras. They were the instant cameras where you would take a picture and it would come out on I don't know how many inches it was. It was probably by 4 inches by 6 inches or something like that, because it had that little holding area at the bottom. So you would take a Polaroid picture of somebody's face, and they would take that Polaroid and they would cut it in half, and they would put it in the folder and tack it down with some sticky tape, and put it in the PC folder. And so you had this hemisphere, right? Hemisphere left of the face. And then they would put it on a lower down on the page as the person got auditing. And you would see the facial hemispheres change as auditing progressed, from what they looked like in the beginning to what they look like, as long as they were taking pictures. And then in this particular one, I think there was maybe 4 pictures there. And there was a significant change that you wouldn't see if you saw the whole face as one face. But hemispherically, you could see that the eyes would move. Typically, most people's eyes, one eye is higher than the other, type of a thing. And so you'd see this reorientation. This is what he's talking about as far as with the genetic entity, that it alters physical structure and eradicates physical malformations. And he says, but these can be otherwise changed by auditing the theta being. That's, the thetan in charge, in other words. For, let's see here, I lost my place. The genetic entity facsimiles include a transfer of somatics from past theta beings, for it is not common for a genetic entity to have the same theta being twice. So what that means is, every time you pick up a body, you either won the lottery or you didn't. Because when you pick up a body as a being, it has the guys. It's sort of like you buy a ship, and with the ship comes a crew, right?
Yep.
So you use that ship until the ship sinks or it is decommissioned and mothballed and then taken apart, and the crew goes somewhere else. Well, it's the same thing with the body.
Hopefully there's a mutiny.
Yeah, and hopefully the crew doesn't do a mutiny. And it's a really bad idea to audit genetic entities, because what happens is when you audit genetic entities, they kick up a fuss. Hubbard says, don't do that. You don't want to audit a genetic entity and it stops the heart. And then, well, guess what? Game over.
Yep.
So we don't audit genetic entities directly. But to get back to the point is that when you pick up a body from lifetime to lifetime, you're not going to have the same ship's crew every time.
Right.
You might have had a guy that ran the heart really well. And and there are several genetic entities in the body.
Okay.
Hubbard says later on. So, and they're all responsible for different areas. So you got the guy that's down below that works in the engine room. You got the guy that takes care of the sails up on top of the deck, and then you have the guy that takes care of the bilge pump, and that sort of a thing. And then there's the guy that works in the galley and makes dinner and processes it and everything to cook, that type of thing. Same thing with the body. So if you win the lottery, you have really robust, really healthy, they're in good, what we would call case shape genetic entities, and the body is a workhorse. I could say with my body this lifetime, it has served me well. I mean, really well. I have a very robust, stout crew on my ship, and they are they're easy to work with, and they run the body well, and I don't have any physical problems. But then again, I've done my OT levels and everything like that. But even before then, there weren't a lot of physical problems. But if you're not so lucky and you lose the lottery, and let's say, worst case, let's not say worst case scenario, you might have MS, right? You might have arthritis. You might have IBS. You might have a host of things. And a lot of this has to do with the nature of the genetic entities. Now, that notwithstanding, you also have the milestone 1 stuff, that you have to deal with as well. So this whole thing gets sorted out in auditing generally through Dianetics. And you're not addressing the GE, you're not addressing the milestone 1 stuff. You are addressing you as a Thetan, the Thetan in charge that he says here. So let's see here. The GE is the constant and continual workhorse of the theta body. It regulates the heartbeat, takes care of all such responses, acts as a stimulus response mind to avoid pain and discover pleasure, and keeps the body running in general. The GE departs from the body much later than the theta being's abandoned one. So when you die, you get off of the ship and you're like, bye ship. The GEs, they stick around. So it says the GE departs from the body much later than the theta being's abandoned one, sees it through the death to the end, and only then leaves to join the line once more 2 or 3 days before conception. This is the mind of an animal, a dog, or a cat, or a cow. So this is what you're dealing with here is the crew sticks around for a while, and sometimes they stick around for even longer than that. It just depends. But that's the quote unquote animal brain that you hear about all the time in the Psychology Today and all that stuff. Whereas it's not the being, the Thetan.
Right. And I would say that's probably what a lot of the spiritual people talk about when they're talking about speaking with their ancestors, where they have these connections to whatever heritage that they're part of, and they have communion with these seemingly other beings. We're probably talking genetic entities, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, here's the deal. On your OT, your new OT5, one of the things that you run into, and I'm not saying anything confidential here, it's just a phenomena that occurs. There's a particular step that you do on that with another auditor, because new OT5 is where you're being audited by a class 9 auditor. You're not doing this solo. And I highly recommend doing that that way. What happens is is you will see, you know how you look at a mirror, you have two mirrors in front of you, one in front of you and one behind you, and you get that never-ending mirror effect. This is one of the things that you run into on this line with the milestone 1 stuff. Is you will see this jumping from you to your dad, and from your dad to your grandma, and from your grandma to and it's sort of like that double mirror thing.
Really?
And you'll see it through the eyes of these people as a double mirror type of a thing. As these things progress down the line, they get passed on. And this is what he's talking about here, as far as, they can be in a body and then they go right before conception. But some of these things stick with the genetic line in a family for whatever reason.
Yeah,
there's a lot
that occurred when I was doing one of the implant GPMs on OT2. I because my dad had done it. My dad's done OT2, and I saw it as if he was running it. And I'm
right.
Like, who's the? Oh, that's my dad. Oh, I've seen my dad running this one. Actually hearing his voice, saying the
yeah.
Yeah,
it's really interesting to see. And that's the neat thing about the OT5 is that Hubbard says, okay, in this particular step, you're going to do this. In this particular step, you're going to do this. And now this step, these are the things you're going to see. And there might be 14 different things, different phenomena. And you'll see most, if not all of those phenomena on that step. And on the next step, same thing. There's all these phenomena. Okay. And you'll see these things. Now, to get back to it, he says, and this is still, this is page 13 in History of Man, bottom paragraph. He says, their injected entities are the third class of target. These are actually synthetics. They are ridges. Remember, we talked about ridges earlier, that think, quote unquote. They form a very complex pattern. They have geographical areas in the body. Remember how I was saying they're in different parts of the body? These areas are standard, pre-clear to pre-clear. These areas answer up on an e-meter like actual minds rather than compartments of a mind. The areas are the center, R-E, not E-R, forehead and down, the right inside from the edge of the jaw halfway out to the shoulder, the right outside from halfway to the shoulder to the point of the shoulder, the left inside opposite from the right inside, the left outside opposite from the right outside, and the stomach entity, which you were mentioning earlier, located in the area of the solar plexus. Remember? Yep. So plus various other entities held in by these basic entities. So you have some entities that are holding in other entities. So you have an org board, an organizing board of guys holding other guys. More on that in another podcast. These entities run off their own past deaths on other time tracks, hold sections of the body paralyzed, bar areas from being audited, withhold information from that's you and me, the Thetan in charge, and do other mischief. They are actually the basis of demon circuits, which is in the technical dictionary as covered in Dianetics, Modern Science of Mental Health. Now, since we're on that topic, let's look up demon circuits, because this is very interesting when it's dealing with your body and you.
Well, here's
what he says.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, these are the injected entities. He says demon circuit. That mental mechanism, this is definition 1, that mental mechanism set up by an engram command, which becoming restimulated and supercharged with secondary engrams are losses, takes over a portion of the analyzer and acts as an individual being. Any command containing you and seeking to dominate it or nullify the individual's judgment is potentially a demon circuit. It doesn't become a real live demon circuit until it becomes keyed in and picks up secondary engrams and locks. 2, a heavily charged portion of the analytical mind, which has been captured by the reactive mind and does its bidding, walled off by charge into a separate entity. Now, the analytical mind, Hubbard says in 1961, they didn't have a name for it, is what he says. This is on the briefing course. The analytical mind is you, the Thetan in charge. So let me read that again with that in mind. He says, a heavily charged portion of the analytical mind, which has been captured by the reactive mind and does its bidding, walled off by charge into a separate entity. So it's sort of like a split from you. And 3, any circuit that vocalizes your thoughts for you that's not natural. It's installed mechanism from engrams, and it slows up thought. That's what a demon circuit is. Very interesting. So let me read this again with that definition in mind, where he says this here. He says, and I'll back up a hair. He says, these entities run off their own past deaths on other tracks, hold sections of the body paralyzed, bar areas from being audited, withhold information from I, the Thetan in charge, and do other mischief. They are actually the basis of demon circuits, as covered in Dianetics, Modern Science, and Mental Health. And they mirror the personality of persons antipathetic to the pre-clear. And what was our second to the last podcast about?
Valences. Wow.
Yeah.
This, folks,
so
you're not going to get this anywhere else.
Yeah, you're not going to get this anywhere else.
This is eons beyond anything else that has existed for, I don't know how long, on this planet or anywhere.
Yeah. And he wrote this book in 1952.
Yeah. And that is, right. I just have to just reiterate again that, like, you're not going to find this anywhere else. Anything else that you find.
No. Yeah, and he goes on and he says, this is really interesting here, and we might lose some people on this, but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
He says they are entirely stimulus response. Each one has, from pre-clear to pre-clear, the same personality and the same body positions. The right inside, for instance, answers up to the name of crew chief. That's right, crew chief. They are male and female. So basically what he's, and I'm going to do an interpretation here. Okay. Because he's not saying this here, and this would be blasphemy in the church. But what he's saying here is that if the right side inside, for instance, answers up to the name of crew chief, why would it answer up to the name of crew chief? What's the tip off there? It's installed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You have to have these guys in certain places in order for the bodies to work.
Yeah.
Okay. So the body is installed with these things, and it actually has a name. One of them has a name, which is crew chief. They are male and female. Their source is probably, quote unquote, a softened up theta being, and they disappear when electronic incidents are audited.
Mm.
So this is, okay. So the nature of this, and boy, oh boy, are we getting into some wild territory with this podcast for people. So what you're looking at is a whole system that was put in place long, long, long ago, that you can't have a marionette puppet without certain things controlling it. It doesn't just require a Thetan in charge to do it. There has to be a composite case. That's the name of this podcast, is Your Body and You. They're different things. Your body is a concatenation of things that have to be there in order for it to function.
Right.
So he says, prior to their disappearance, they can exhibit a wonderful and awesome role in confusing the pre-clear. The auditor can move the attention to the pre-clear into one of these and audit it through a death or painful experience, and so bring it up to present time. In view of the fact that auditing basic electronic incidents eradicates them, little attention need to be paid to them by the auditor, beyond knowing that they are there, that they are the mysterious voices in the heads of some pre-clears, that they make critical or commanding remarks to him, and serve in general as a fine source of aberration. So this brings us round to, you are a composite being, and not everything that you think, wait for it, not everything that comes into your mind comes from you. So, you see these people that are in the padded rooms and stuff like that. Well, maybe they've just had a little too much going on in life, and these things took over, and they sat in the back seat or in the trunk of the car for the time being. He says paralysis, anxiety, stomachs, arthritis, which we mentioned earlier, And many ills and aberrations have been relieved by auditing them. An e-meter shows them up and makes them confess their misdeeds. They are probably just compartments of the mind which, cut off, begin to act as though they were persons. Here is an inexhaustible source of study and speculation, which I leave to another, having located the method of wiping them out without paying any attention to them. So that's another class. So far we've got injected entities and genetic entities.
Mm-hmm.
Next. Did you want to add anything to that before we move on to the next category?
This is all fascinating to hear again. And for when we're talking about the naval analogy with this, the like Navy analogy, not belly button analogy, but makes sense. You can't.
Well, it is, but it isn't.
You can't sail a ship without a crew. You
right.
can't have a computer or a smartphone without an operating system. There's
That's right. And some operating systems are better than others.
Right. Yeah, and so it's just like that with the body. Like you got to have the different warrant officers on post running the different the different functions. So one of them being called a crew chief. I was just literally thinking about how they all go around wearing a warrant officer bar on them, and then he says crew chief. I'm like, yeah, he probably had the same thought about it. Him having been so you got your other commissioned officers around, and you got the crew who are enlisted, and you've got really good enlisted crew who become warrant officers.
Right.
Implanted.
Yeah. So, it is a concatenation. It is a composite case. Now, here's where the Thetanid charge comes in. It says theta beings, and this is page 14 of History of Man, 1970s version. Theta beings are the fourth and only really important target for the auditor. The theta being is the I, Thetanid charge. It is who the pre-clear is. You are, and you see this all the time where people say, well, me and my Thetan. Right there, it's the tip off. You go, yeah, they don't get it.
No.
Because you don't have a Thetan. You are a Thetan.
No. You be a Thetan.
You be a Thetan. So if all the entities and the beingnesses of the pre-clear were hydrogen balloons locked up inside him and each had a name and identity, the auditor might be confused, and the pre-clear is confused as to who I is. You see this all the time with people. That's me saying that, not him. But if the pre-clear were suddenly opened and the balloons let loose, the I balloon would float free, clear, and unmistakable, and that I balloon would be the theta being. It would be who the pre-clear always thought he was anyway. Okay? All others are simply modifiers. Okay? And this goes back to the valences podcast as well, because the OCA, the personality test that we use, shows whose valence the person is in.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't show them. It shows whose valence they're in, which is what he's talking about here. Let's see here. He says again, all others are simply modifiers. The theta being does not get lost, does not go away, it cannot be stolen. If it went away, the pre-clear would be with it and be it. The vagueness of personal identity is caused by the confusion of the theta being, not its inextricable entanglement with other identities. The theta being can be confused, he says tanglement, not entanglement, but it is entanglement. Come on, let's face it. Entanglement will serve. The theta being can be confused in itself. It can be hypnotized. It can go to sleep. It can experience emotions. It can think. It can feel pain. It is immortal in that it cannot die, right? Because it's not of this universe. But it could possibly become so burdened with facsimiles that it could not continue along with bodies. It does not need a body to think, make facsimiles, experience emotions, remember, or perceive. So that's important, but there, what he says about it is immortal in that it cannot die, but it could possibly become so burdened with facsimiles that it could not continue along with bodies. Yeah. And you know what that can be? Yeah. Ghosts.
Okay. Yeah.
And what's one thing, but it's very interesting.
You accumulate.
It does not need a body to think, make facsimiles, experience emotions, remember, or perceive. The theta being seems natively capable of producing considerable matter, energy, space, and time energy. Facsimiles alone inhibit this ability. So the more facsimiles you have, the less energy you can produce as a thetan. This is why auditing works, folks.
Right there is worth being said 2 more times, I think.
Right.
Yeah, right there. What you just read. Will you read that again for us, please?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I'll say it 2 more times. The theta being seems natively capable of producing considerable matter energy, space, and time energy. Facsimiles alone inhibit this ability. Okay, so one more time. The theta being seems natively capable of producing considerable matter energy, space, and time energy, MEST energy. Facsimiles alone inhibit this ability. This is why people get auditing.
Yeah, this is why
why their lives get better.
Yeah, this is the whole point of why we're here doing Scientology.
That's right. That's why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Whereas it has come to feel an association with the bad company of genetic entities in the MEST universe. I'm going to read that again, and then I'm going to say something here. Whereas it has come to feel, this is the thetan in charge coming to feel this, in association with the bad company of genetic entities in the MEST universe, that it is a stimulus response thing. It is quite capable of generating thought independently of previous effort, counter effort, or experience. Now, we've talked about it on the podcast before about tone levels. And the way this works with tone levels is that if you are in a room with people who are lower toned than you, how do you get into affinity reality communication and understanding with them? You agree to drop your tone level in order to be real enough to them that they want to have something to do with you. So in other words, what Hubbard says is the higher tone selectively gives. Now, what's the point of all this? Here's the point. Your tone level is altered by the fact that you're the bus driver in this bus, and you've got a bunch of clowns in the back jacking around, shooting in the head with rubber bands and making all kinds of silly noise and honking their horns and all this stuff. And you're like, God, more of this?
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And sometimes they take a dump in the seat and it's just like, come on.
Right. And you're just like, God, I got to clean that up now too. Boy, that stinks.
Yeah.
So, and this almost literally, that's what happens with bodies.
Yeah.
So the point is what does the body do in line with our podcast title, Your Body and You? Well, your body brings you as a being, as the thetan in charge, down the tone scale, because you have to be in agreement with it in order to operate it properly.
Yeah.
Again, this takes us back to, and I'm going to say it a third time, the theta being seems natively capable of producing considerable matter, energy, space, and time energy. Facsimiles alone inhibit this ability. Okay, you got your facsimiles, the body's got it, then you got the milestone 1 stuff going on. Mm-hmm. So it's a liability to be drinking the water in Mexico,
right?
Basically, as an analog, a funny one, to me at least.
Yeah, so we'll just say too, like what he just mentioned there in History of Man about facsimiles in getting in the way of this. The whole reason why we're doing Dianetics and Scientology is to become a better skipper, to learn how to be a ship's captain, so that you can create matter, energy, space, and time. So you can make your postulates and have them stick.
That's right.
The more of those facsimiles that are in the way, the less adept you are as a skipper. But
yeah, and I think I've got a pretty good analog.
Yeah,
it would be sort of like you're a radio station.
Yeah.
Okay. And your radio station, because the radio station part of it is, I'm sorry to beat this to death, folks, the theta being seems natively capable of producing considerable matter, energy, space, and time. Facsimiles alone inhibit this ability. So you're the radio station, and the radio station has a certain wattage because of, let's just say there's capacitors, resistors on the line for its output. Because what is radio? It is energy being sent out in the electromagnetic spectrum being sent out. Okay. So if you're on the other side of town, you can't hear it. And maybe you're hearing another radio station that's on the same channel, and it's difficult to hear because there's all of this resistance. Well, the facsimiles, the person's case, their reactive mind, both theirs and that of the genetic entities and the composite case, prevent it from having the amount of wattage that it needs in order to push out its radio program properly, which in this case, the radio program would be your intention to make a postulate or a decision and get through life and do it properly and make it manifest. Your ability to perceive the intention of others, your ability to perceive knowingness and imbue yourself into things. You don't have a high enough wattage on you, this radio station, in order to do this. So what do? You remove the resistors. That's what auditing does.
Yeah.
Gets rid of this crap.
Right. That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He says the pre-clear is not guarding or harboring or hiding his theta being. He is his theta being. He is himself or herself. I mean, it doesn't matter because you're not a gender as a theta. Your body has a gender. You don't. A relaxed understanding of this will prevent a considerable confusion on the part of the auditor and the pre-clear. If the pre-clear is responding rationally, he is the theta being responding. Otherwise, somebody's pushed you over on the bus full of clowns and there's a clown at the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Ergo, valences.
Yeah. And you still see the terrain passing by through the windows of the bus and the wheels moving, but somebody else is driving.
Right. He says, as the theta being can be quote unquote put to sleep, it is possible to bring then to the surface a genetic entity or another entity, milestone 1, using the motor controls of the body, can talk or experience, but the individual himself is not usually aware of what happened then. The various strange multi-personality manifestations of the minds are occasioned by valences, there it is, and their basics, the entities. Ordinarily, unless the pre-clear is obviously insane, these subpersonalities are not distinctly units in themselves, but only color the activities of the theta being. Therefore, that's why the OCA, the personality test, shows valences so well.
Mm-hmm.
Hypnotism is the process of bringing into being the genetic entity or other entity by putting the theta being into unconsciousness. Self-hypnosis is the process of the theta being hypnotizing the genetic entity or other entity and setting a compulsive or inhibited circuit with it. The auditor must know that the existence of a matter, energy, space, and time, MEST body, within the fields of the theta being is incidental and even unfortunate for processing, which in the absence of body goes much faster. There you go. So the body is the biggest resistor of all that you have to deal with as a being. So that's why Dianetics is important, to get those marbles that we were talking about, the analogy of just a bunch of marbles on the floor in a mess. You're putting order into disorder, one marble at a time. Okay. It goes on to say the theta being is both outside and inside the messed body. It is not just inside. The only reason it is inside at all is that any field would penetrate the messed body. The messed body, a meat body, what we have. The messed body should not be thought of as a harbor or vessel for the theta being. A better example would be a sliver, which I mentioned this earlier, a sliver inserted unwantedly in the thumb, where the thumb would be the theta being. The messed, matter, energy, space, and time body, the sliver. Messed bodies are good identification tags. They generate exciting emotions. They are fun to operate at times, but they are no end of existence.
Yeah, right.
So, 2 more paragraphs, bear with me. The theta being with its alertness restored is capable of remolding. That's you and I. We are capable of remolding the human body within its field, taking off weight here, restoring it there, changing appearance and even height. The body can also be altered by auditing cells or the genetic entity. All in all, bodies are very easy to handle where their condition is concerned. The question is rather, are they practical? Good question. The theta being can evidently manufacture bodies or a reasonable facsimile thereof, which while they do not labor, neither do they have to be fed. Well, that's a great science fiction novel right there, that type of thing. I've seen that on the track. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the most important part of all of this. To a society quite mad on the subject of messed bodies, what we're inhabiting right now, our listeners, most of them, I say jokingly, very elaborated on care of the body. Quote unquote, the foregoing may seem a trifle strange, and one might think the writer had to be short, slipped a cable or two in his width. Indeed, it is very probable that critics may say so, for the reality is entirely outraged by such sudden statements. But this matter has been under investigation for a year and a half. This was written in 52. As witness, the theta clear on the Science and Survival tone scale chart, which I drew in January 1951. Now, theta clear, modern day, is just clear.
Yeah.
So he says, now they are not so unknown, and while there's much to learn about them still, much can be stated concerning them as clear fact. Back of these statements is a 2-year public record of making statements which, under grueling investigation by others, turn out to be exactly what they were said to be. For turning away from the above, try Scientology, infinity to zero, and zero to infinity, or 8008, and learn again what it is to be truly free, and ours auditing will prove it. Mm-hmm. So, those are the constituents that we deal with in a composite being from the book History of Man. So these are the things that you have to deal with. So don't take it too personally if your body kicks up. Don't take it too personal if you can't make your decisions, your postulates stick and things like that, because there are a lot of other influences that you have to deal with. It's not just you, but like Hubbard says, you can't go the adverse effect of something that you understand. That's the point of this podcast, is to make you well aware that you can read History of Man, and it's basically, another title for the book is What to Audit, from the standpoint of 1952.
Yeah.
Okay, not 2023. So that's so 70 plus years ago. Now, I'm not saying that data isn't valid, but what I am saying is that if you understand this stuff and you realize that there's a lot going on here in this bus with all of these things that you're driving around, you're the owner of the bus and you're the bus driver. You need to understand that the way to get this stuff in line is to apply Dianetics and Scientology to it by co-auditing or getting auditing on it, which is faster than co-auditing, because you have to get trained on it and audit somebody else. They audit you, and you audit somebody else, and they audit you. I mean, that's the way to make it clear planet. If everybody took responsibility for one other person, the whole planet could be clear in 6 months. Yeah. Or a year at most. But anyway, so the point is that you're putting order into disorder, an awful lot of disorder. You have a lot of things going on in the body that are in disagreement with each other, and they're pulling your personal emotional tone level down, and don't go into agreement with it any more than you have to. Of course, you're feeling crappy. You're feeling crappy because you're in a meat body.
Yeah.
That's the point. And don't expect it to feel good on every given day. But if you want it to feel better, and you want to be exterior to it, then get some auditing, get some training, and you won't be as much of the adverse effect of it. I'm not saying that you won't entirely be the adverse effect of it, but at least you know what's going on. Because if you know what's going on, there's these components to it, just like there is on an electronics board. You've got your different pieces that do different things for input, for output, for processing, all of this stuff. And you're not your brain.
No. And KRC, knowledge, responsibility, control. And I have control over that body.
That's right. And that's what this is about. Knowledge, responsibility, and control.
The responsibility there is the skipper to not put the ship in danger, where you might be putting influences there for the rest of the crew that could aberrate the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. You don't want the engine room operator or the cook navigating the ship.
Right. They
don't know how to read charts.
Exactly. Yeah. And
yeah, exactly. You have to. But that's the interesting thing with this, is that nobody gets an email or a registered letter or a handbook. Like in Beetlejuice, they have a handbook for the dead. To let you know what is this thing being dead. What can you do? What can you not do? And all this stuff. Well, in this case, what can you do and what can you not do in the physical universe in a meat body, and what you're going to experience. You don't get a handbook. Well, guess what? You do.
Right.
It's called Scientology and Dianetics.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why it's important to understand this stuff. And it's even more important to understand that the technology from 1950 forward improved. That's not to say that this technology, it did get changed, but it was because it went back to basics, and more things were found out, more things were researched, more things were found out, and these things got codified to the degree that Hubbard said, okay, now we have it. And you can see that all the time in the lectures. Now we have it. And then a couple of days later, now we have it. Because he didn't know what he didn't know.
Right.
In these lectures. So if you listen to a lecture from 1954 and he's saying, do this, don't do this. And then in 1963, he says, well, do this, don't do this. And it's the opposite of what he said in 54. And then 1973, he says, do this, don't do this. And it's the opposite of 64 and 53 and 54. Well, that's because new data came upon the scene, and now we have a much better understanding and an accurate picture of it. And what we have now is an accurate version of Scientology. And some would beg to differ, and they'd say, well, Hubbard didn't do this. Hubbard didn't change this. This was changed by somebody else. And well, I mean, that's why we exist as an organization is leave that to us. We'll let you know. And if somebody disagrees with it, well, okay, then you don't have to do that sort of thing. But, we feel that this is what you need to do on this.
Yeah. And it's better than anything else out there.
Yeah.
You were not going to find anything like this anywhere else. Most of the other practices that exist out there are so far from the target as far as being able to do something like just everything that you read there at the beginning of History of Man, where he talks about the injected entities, he talks about the genetic entities and all of that, or a singular genetic entity in that book at least. You're not going to find anything like that anywhere else. They're still going to be talking about your brain this, your brain that.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's from a spiritual approach, it's just going to all say the same thing. If we all need to love each other and become one, it's like you'll either find one or the other. You'll either right. A very spiritual thing where you end up like we did the podcast about, are we all one with the universe? Nope. That's another aberration. Or you are your body is the other one you'll find. And there's all the yoga, there's all those things that'll go down tangents and everything that'll lead you somewhere off on the side of the road, so far from being able to get anywhere with your case.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing is it comes down to the accurate data. And then once you have the accurate data, finding out that it's true for you.
Yeah.
And, some of this data, like we're reading about in History of Man, you have to take his word for it on some of this stuff. But I mean, eventually, and I can assure our listeners that what he's talking about there are actual factual concepts. I've witnessed it myself, both in auditing with another auditor and in my solo audit. And he's not making this stuff up. This is the case.
Right.
So I hope you guys enjoyed Your Body and You, and basically a breakdown of the constituents that make up the universe that you operate, eat your lunch, work, sleep, enjoy life, despise life, all of that, and is your ship, your bus. And we hope this has cleared up some of these things. Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add before we depart?
Oh, no, this is just excellent. And if anybody wants to find the Milestone 1 lectures, we've got them over on SoundCloud, and is it also on the AOGP website?
It's on the AOGP website. The Milestone 1 is going to be 51, and year 1951 in the multimedia library, which is on the website, or you can find them on our SoundCloud. They're both one and the same. They're just embedded from SoundCloud.
Yeah. And then History of Man, What's Audit is also there too, right?
Yep. It sure is.
So,
yeah, I think there's four lectures on the History of Man lectures that I forget where they come from, but they're really great. They're really great lectures too.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are excellent. I think those are also 1952 or 51.
Yeah. I think they're 52. They're right around the same time as Milestone 1.
Yeah. Great.
So if you want to find our website, it's AO hyphen or dash GP, A is in Apple, O is in Oscar, hyphen, G is in George, P is in Paul, .org, O-R-G. And then you can go to the multimedia library and drill down to find the lectures and references and everything else. If you have any questions, please fire us off an email in the contact us at the bottom right-hand corner of the website. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow for another podcast. Be well, namaste, and we love you guys. Bye-bye.